Hi and welcome everyone. I'm here to take you through an article on the Guardian, published today, I believe. Yes, 18th of July 2023. It's about the issue of justice in Tigray and how the Ethiopian regime is trying to obstruct uh, justice um, via different means. And maybe before I go into the details of the article, I think it might be prudent to give you a bit of context in terms of what other publications have been saying about the same issue about justice. I think it was last week that the Economist wrote that Amhara forces in Western Tigray, with possible, well, under the possible command of the Ethiopian regime, were, were hiding and disrupting evidence by burning burial grounds and by exhuming bodies, and throwing them into unknown places, and other subterfuges that we don't know. And there was another article, I think it was on the Washington Post. I'm sure I presented it here, about how Eritrean forces committed horrendous crimes around Adwa, and before they so this is around the time when the Tigray forces and the Ethiopian regime signed an agreement, a peace agreement, so-called peace agreement in Pretoria. How Eritrean forces uh, disrupted burial grounds around Mashawito in Adwa. And the methods might vary, but the theme is one thing. Both the Ethiopian and the Eritrean regimes, who, let's not forget, are a team when it comes to the Tigray war. The Tigray genocide was a team project. It was something that they planned together, and everything that either of them ostensibly does is with the knowledge of the other party, because it's a joint project. So when you say Ethiopian regime or Eritrean regime, actually what we mean is kind of both of them acting together. And the Amhara forces have also been their junior partners, and with the Amhara forces destroy evidence in Western Tigray. What we should from time to time remind ourselves is they do what they do with the knowledge and blessing of the Eritrean and the Ethiopian regimes. So I think generally the what we should always remember is that they have been trying to make sure that they destroy any trace of evidence, so that it would be very very easy for them to get away with murder. And speaking of murder, I think the one sentence summary of the write up of these particular write up on the Guardian would be that the Ethiopian regime and the Eritrean regime are on the verge of getting away with murder. That is basically the point that they make here, Aaron and Martin. So they they start by describing the sort of atrocities that Ethiopia and Eritrea committed the past, I think, 2.5 years now. They describe the sheer number of Tigrayans that they have murdered. They describe the sexual slavery, rape, torture, mass arbitrary detention, extrajudicial killings, and other crimes. And they say that the when the international community pushed for justice, the Ethiopian regime, as we all know, resisted, and the UN body was forced to settle for what they call joint investigation, as you remember. And the authors here say that the findings of the joint investigation came nowhere near to covering the what the Ethiopian and Eritrean regimes actually did in Tigray. And they say that the joint investigation was, if anything, just a sham attempt. And they say that it was an attempt by the Ethiopian regime to cover up its crimes in Tigray. And the authors here correctly argue that the joint investigation and the findings of the joint investigation shouldn't be taken seriously, and that's a good point. And then they say how international partners, could also say the international community, have generally failed to learn lessons when it comes to Tigray, because if it did learn its lessons, it would have pushed for a proper independent investigation. But what happened was, after the joint investigation was published, international partners, of course, pushed for a more independent one, and the result was the name. This one, yeah, the International Commission, as you could see here, International Commission of Human Rights Experts on Ethiopia. So the establishment of this commission was an attempt to make amends to the previous damage done through the joint investigation, and this was a step in the right direction on the face of it. But what happened was, through lobbying and other mechanisms, the Ethiopian regime succeeded in blocking the commission. So the commission has never set foot in Tigray now. And as we all know, its mandate is going to end in September, barring any sort of magic. It's very, very unlikely that its mandate would be extended. But of course, it hasn't had enough time to investigate the crimes committed in Tigray without ever visiting Tigray or any of the atrocity sites, or interviewing people face to face, and so it's a very, very flawed and fundamentally compromised exercise, although it's by every account better than the joint investigation, because the joint investigation, as I said, was an attempt by the Ethiopian regime to water down the crimes, and it has succeeded in that endeavor, the Ethiopian regime and the Eritrean regime. And so the result now, with the mandate of the ICHRRE coming to an end, and with the Ethiopian government successfully blocking it from visiting Tigray, they say that whatever findings is going to come up with is going to be limited. For the same reasons, because number one, it hasn't had enough time, and number two, it hasn't had access, and inevitably, whatever findings, however, the findings might be reported in good faith. There's no reason to suspect that the ICHREE is trying to provide excuse to the Ethiopian regime. There is no reason to suspect that. But however well intentioned the investigation might be, its findings is going to be, by design, very, very limited. And the result, the overall effect of that, is that the issue of justice is now at the hands of the Ethiopian regime, and you will have heard of what the Ethiopian regime has been calling the comprehensive national transitional justice. The Ethiopian regime has been busy trying to sell and get legitimacy for the comprehensive national transitional justice, But of course, that's a joke, right? Because the regime itself is the very entity that the Tigrayans, well, not just Tigrayans, anybody who has followed the Tigray war would know that one of the main perpetrators of crimes is the Ethiopian regime itself. So it's really incredibly stupid to expect that the regime itself would be a fair adjudicator of crimes that it itself has committed in collaboration with the Eritrean regime. But through lobbying and diplomacy and other mechanisms, the regime has been successful in selling the comprehensive national transitional justice now. And now diplomats from the US, from EU could be heard saying that Ethiopia should be given a chance to handle the issue internally, that people should be happy with local institutions being strengthened and all that charade. But it's a lie. Everybody knows that Ethiopia can't on its own. It's not because it doesn't have the capacity. It's not because there is lack of manpower or there is lack of resource or anything. It's because it's not in its interest to be an impartial judge on an issue involving itself and its partners. But that's what they say, and they cite somewhere in the article they mention what a high-ranking government official, Bacha Debele was one of the top military commanders during the war. And Bacha Debele was very blunt when he said, according to the write-up here, Bacha Debele is quoted as saying that Ethiopia, the issue of justice and peace are incompatible. He says that Ethiopia should just focus on ensuring peace by forgetting justice. And now, I'm not saying that is a correct understanding. I think there is no contradiction between pursuing justice and peace, and actually justice is one of the foundations for peace. But that is not how Bacha Debele understands the issue, and there is every reason to believe that Bacha Debele's understanding of the issue is not different from how the Ethiopian regime understands the issue, and their understanding is that there is no reason to focus on accountability and justice. They believe that that's going to jeopardize the peace process, and that the right way to go about things is to just forget justice and accountability and just focus on peace. And the US, this is the very bizarre aspect of this whole saga. The US is also has also subscribed to the Ethiopian regime's talking points. As you remember, the US had accused the Ethiopian government of having committed ethnic cleansing at the very least, and a number of other things. But of course, the US has now climbed down from that. The US doesn't say ethnic cleansing anymore. They don't say war crime. They don't say anything. Actually, the US is now on the process of lifting restrictions that it has imposed on Ethiopia on the false ground that the human rights situation in Ethiopia has now improved, and that whatever human rights abuses issue remain, they will be handled through the internal comprehensive national transitional justice process. So the US is now one of the main forces trying to give legitimacy to the sham exercise of the Ethiopian regime. And the authors correctly conclude that the overall effect of this is going to be the burial of justice. That Tigrans, millions of Tigrans who died, and their family are going to be forgotten. And they say this is a tragedy. Number one, because victims are now going to be forgotten, but number two, regimes are now going to feel emboldened, because if you could get away with killing 1 million people through the most medieval mechanisms, by using forced starvation, by bombing civilians at school and at their home, by using all sorts of tricks in the book. If you could do that, and if you could get away with in the glare, in the view of the international community, then that means that you could do literally anything and everything. That is what the message would be to other authoritarian regimes in Africa and elsewhere. And the authors, I think, they're very, very pessimistic about the possibility of Tigrans getting any sort of justice. And this is an incredibly forthright article. The authors don't mince their words in condemning the Ethiopian regime, the international community, for falling for the tricks of the Ethiopian regime, and also for they are damning of the TPLF as well, because the TPLF has been, although we could sort of understand why the TPLF has been forced to play along, but maybe the TPLF should have made the point of saying that justice and accountability is something that they can't just brush aside for political expedience. So that's I hope I have given you a fairly good summary of the article, but if you don't feel like I have summarized it well, you could have just, there is no paywall on the Guardian, so you should go and read the article. But I think that more than reading the article, for me, the most important thing is that we advocate for justice. The Ethiopian government or regime, I should never say government, it's just that would be a huge insult to the people murdered and whose lives has been destroyed by the regime. We should try to push for justice. The regime might want to move on. American government might want to move on. Other international partners might want to move on for political expedience again. But we have every reason to try to push for justice for as much as we can. And justice might be, well, they say that justice delayed is justice denied, but I don't think that is the assumption under which we should operate now. It might take years or decades or whatever, but we should always try to push for justice. And I believe one way of doing that is by making sure that everybody knows what fair and brave journalists are writing. And I think the authors here are very, very fair in the assessment of the situation, and we should help them make sure that their word gets to as many people as possible. And that was that from me. Thank you for the listen, and until I see you next time, bye bye.